I want you to think of your favourite franchise. Done? Okay, now think of its first installment. Whatever it is you're thinking of, be it a book, film, game, that first incarnation is kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, in comparison to the rest of the series, often it takes a while before a franchise really figures out its identity or the rules it's going to operate under. This phenomenon has a name: early installment weirdness. My favourite procrastination trap, TV Tropes, says it best. The first installment is like a prototype, the first rough draft for a book. I think early installment weirdness can be very charming a lot of the time. So today I want to discuss a couple of examples, and in doing so, come to a conclusion about why it's actually a really good thing. The Simpsons is a pretty well-known example, so I'll keep the explanation brief. Before they graduated to having their own show, The Simpsons starred in animated shorts as part of the Tracy Ullman Show. As you might have guessed though, they weren't quite the family they would ultimately become. They debuted looking like this, and while the cast was there from the get-go, some of their voices would undergo a bit of workshopping.
Hey there, boy. Mom took the girls to the ballet. You want the frozen fish nuggets or the pork-a-roni?
Well, it's a toss-up, Dad.
I got an idea.
Also, the wry comedic writing I associate with The Simpsons hadn't been perfected yet, to put it politely, so the whole ordeal is a little uncanny.
It's very precarious.
But what I do like about this is that you can see the character designs evolve in real time. Pick a few shorts from throughout the 3-season run, and marvel as the characters' features gradually soften and morph into what will ultimately become their final designs. The story goes that the rough initial designs were never actually intended to be seen by our eyes. The Simpsons creator, Matt Groening, assumed they'd be refined before being animated. I'm really glad we were able to see them though. I think it's pretty inspiring that characters who initially looked like this were able to make it big. Even beyond the shorts and into The Simpsons proper, you'll still notice some peculiarities. Picture, if you will, The Simpsons intro. We pan through Springfield and over to Bart, who writes some witty phrase on the chalkboard and then skates away, ever the rebel. Cut to Homer, busy at work on a uranium rod at the nuclear power plant. After a long day of labour, he pulls down the hood of his jumpsuit and clocks out. Except that's not even Homer's job, is it? He sits in this little office, eating donuts all day. At the beginning of the show, he works a vague technician job, which he's fired from in the 3rd episode.
I might have known it was you, Simpson. But sir, I don't want to hear about it, Simpson. You're fired.
But at no point outside of the intro have we ever seen Homer doing this. I think it's pretty funny how 35 years later, this sequence still plays at the start of episodes, and has even been reanimated into HD. Now let's shift gears and talk about a character perhaps only second to Mickey Mouse in terms of how watertight their brand is. And that character is Mario. It's true that some components of the Mario franchise hit the mark relatively quickly. His design, for one, has more or less stayed the same since its inception, as has the series' music. What about the stuff that didn't stick, though? Like the part where Bowser transforms Toads into brick blocks, which Mario jumps up and smashes into pieces. Or what about him being Donkey Kong's evil captor? It's a nice reminder that all art is ultimately just a big scattershot of ideas. Some things stick, others don't. And that's okay. Nintendo is very particular about their squeaky clean image. They're not fond of giving us any sort of peek behind the curtain, which is why it's great that you can look at the first decade or so of the Mario series and find all sorts of bizarre oddities that would never get made today. There's the official Mario rap album, which I've discussed before. There's also these quiz cards, which are full of weird images. Here's Luigi, making unfortunate discoveries about World War II, Mario about to make a very unfortunate discovery aboard the Titanic, and the brothers being drafted into the army. It's kind of surreal. The art style on these cards is essentially identical to official artwork being made today, yet the content so clearly isn't. As I said, some things stick, others don't. Every franchise, every brand is the product of years and years of workshopping, a big mural of concepts and ideas. Season 1 of the US version of The Office lifts heavily from the British original, and it sort of gets lost in translation. I love how bleak the original show is, but it didn't gel with wider American audiences. So They adapted and tweaked things based on what wasn't working, and generally livened things up to make it into an incredibly successful show. I think it's a shame a lot of the big streaming platforms will cancel shows so prematurely now if they don't immediately take off, because it prevents this kind of organic development from happening. There's no such thing as a perfect idea, and the ones that seem perfect are really the product of many rough drafts and an amalgamation of other influences. Had Netflix been in charge of The Simpsons, it could well have been truncated while they still look like this, and we never would have been blessed with 8 glorious seasons, or 9 glorious seasons, or however many seasons of The Simpsons you consider to be good. So what do you do then, when an old installment is so out of line with the rest of the series that it sticks out like a sore thumb? Well, you kind of have 2 choices. You can either suck up your pride and acknowledge it, or you retcon it. Now, there are certainly very valid reasons for retcons. Maybe an idea seemed great at the time, but you've now realised it's actually quite offensive or harmful. Maybe you've always known an idea was a bit rubbish, but now you've come up with a way to improve it. On the whole, though, I'm not a big fan of the retcon. I think it's charming how, for instance, the old Pokemon designs with rougher edges and more realistic proportions are allowed to coexist with the newer, more stylized ones. Recent entries in the series find ways to reimagine them in fun ways, but never replace the originals. I also respect franchises like Doctor Who, which take changing continuity and say, it's not a bug, it's a feature. After all, everything is a product of its time. It's easy to laugh at outdated ideas now, but give it a few decades and the boot will inevitably be on the other foot. So all of this is to say, keep making weird stuff. I think early installment weirdness is a perfect reminder to keep throwing things at the wall, and to do it publicly too. No matter how rough or strange an idea seems, it might just be the first iteration of something great. Thanks for watching.
The pork-a-roni.